In September of 1187, Saladin, the Sultan of Egypt and Syria, arrived at the gates of Jerusalem with a united, elite Muslim army of 40,000 men. To understand the sheer vulnerability of the Holy City at this exact moment, you have to look a few weeks into the past. Out on the sun-baked, rocky expanse of the Horns of Hattin, Saladin had already annihilated the Crusader kingdom's entire professional field army. This diagram illustrates the physical mismatch that followed. Inside Jerusalem's walls, the population had swollen to 100,000 terrified refugees. But to defend them, the city had fewer than 14 professional knights left. 14 men bracing for an assault by 40,000 soldiers. By every standard metric of medieval warfare, the defense of Jerusalem was a logistical impossibility. The city was mathematically doomed, and logic dictated it should fall within hours. The people inside Jerusalem were motivated by a very specific terror. They vividly remembered the year 1099, when the first Crusaders breached these same walls and slaughtered tens of thousands of Muslim and Jewish civilians. With the tables now turned, the Christians trapped inside expected Saladin to return the favor with total slaughter. Recognizing this, the city's highest-ranking surviving noble, Balian of Ibelin, broke centuries of military tradition. He gathered 60 noble-blooded squires and merchant sons, some as young as 14, and formally knighted them on the spot to create a makeshift officer corps. Next, he ordered the mass arming of 2,000 ordinary civilians. Bakers were handed crossbows, blacksmiths gripped spears, and even monks held rusty swords, despite having zero combat training. Balian had weaponized the sheer, unadulterated terror of a trapped civilian populace. Saladin opened his campaign with psychological pressure. For days, he surrounded the city with 40,000 burning torches at night, accompanied by the ceaseless, deafening beat of massed drums. When the psychological warfare didn't trigger an immediate surrender, Saladin ordered elite Mamluk cavalry to launch probing attacks against the city gates. What those elite soldiers met on the walls was completely alien to professional warfare. Instead of trained archers, they were repelled by women pouring boiling oil from copper pots, teenage girls firing heavy crossbows, and young children hurling stones down onto armored helmets. Stunned by the resistance, Saladin escalated to heavy siege warfare. He brought up 14 massive mangonels, huge catapults capable of hurling 300-pound stones, and began systematically pounding the ancient limestone defenses. The civilian response was immediate. As the massive stones cracked the ramparts, thousands of merchants, women, and priests formed massive human chains, passing timber and rubble hand to hand to patch the walls almost as fast as they were being destroyed. Raw communal labor and desperation temporarily neutralized the era's most advanced professional siege engineering. The turning point arrived on September 29th. Saladin's sappers successfully tunneled beneath the eastern wall, collapsing a 30-meter section of the stone defenses into a roaring cloud of dust. The gap gaped wide open. Professional Egyptian infantry and heavily armed Mamluk cavalry poured directly into the breach, expecting the exhausted civilians to finally break and run. Instead, Balian personally led a suicidal countercharge right into the rubble, flanked by his 160 newly minted teenage knights. Behind them, the civilian tactics reached a fever pitch. Women waded into the melee, beating armored soldiers with kitchen knives and pots. Children wearing black tunics, calling themselves Rebecca's Raidens, darted through hails of arrows to drag the wounded to safety and deliver water to the front line. The sheer volume and fanatic ferocity of these doomed civilians physically clogged the breach, their bodies forming a human barrier that finally stalled the elite Muslim advance. By day 13, both sides were exhausted. Inside the city, the Christians had zero reserves left. The breach remained open, and everyone knew a fresh assault at dawn would wipe them out. Knowing the physical battle was lost, Balian of Ibelin rode out to meet Saladin face-to-face, carrying an impossible negotiation. Looking at this map of 12th century Jerusalem, we can see exactly what Balian was leveraging. He delivered a terrifying ultimatum. If Saladin's army stormed the walls, the defenders would immediately slit the throats of the 5,000 Muslim prisoners of war held inside the city, and then slaughter their own families to spare them from slavery. And the threat escalated from there. Balian swore his engineers would burn the Dome of the Rock and the Al-Aqsa Mosque to ash, pull down the holy sites stone by stone, and poison every well in the city. Saladin would conquer nothing but ruins and corpses. It was an outrageous bluff, but it worked entirely because Saladin had just spent 2 grueling weeks watching these exact civilians fight with enough suicidal fanaticism to actually follow through with it. Faced with the total destruction of the city he had fought his entire life to liberate, Saladin chose calculated mercy. He accepted Balian's terms, ensuring the holy sites remained intact and avoiding a pointless bloodbath. The terms were highly structured. The Christians would evacuate peacefully by paying a modest ransom. And when thousands of the poorest refugees couldn't afford the fee, Saladin and his commanders opened their own treasuries to personally buy their freedom. On October 2nd, the gates opened. 100,000 Christians marched out in an orderly, bloodless evacuation, leaving the city's architecture and history completely untouched. By weaponizing a desperate civilian population, Balian and his knights demonstrated the hard limits of overwhelming force, successfully pivoting from an inevitable massacre toward a negotiated mercy.